If you are curious about a wet palette, we're going to be looking at the Golden Maple 2-in-1 dry and wet palette today. This is going to be an unboxing and review. So I've been painting Warhammer for coming up on 3 years. It'll be like 3 years in the spring of 2026, and I have not ever used a wet palette. Part of that is when I got into the hobby, I wasn't sure that I was going to stick with it. I just wanted to kind of try things at first and just have kind of been flying by the seat of my pants since then. I've recently had a few upgrades to my setup because I've been doing this for a while now. This is a hobby that I know I'm going to be doing for years to come. And so my wife got me this for Christmas. I mentioned some interest in it, and Golden Maple is actually a brand that I like. I use their brushes. I like them a lot. So we're going to take a look at this today, and let's start by looking at what is actually in the box. We actually do get some brushes in this set, a total of 11. Looks like there's some dry brushes and some other brushes of various sizes. And then we have the dry and wet palette itself. It has sponges, the wet palette paper, elastic band, and brush rest holder. We will get this whole thing opened up and I'll show you all these pieces. Let's cut into it here. There we go. Okay, so we have our sponges and our paper. Looks like these are already wet. I can see what looks like some moisture in these bags. So that's actually kind of neat. We don't have to moisten them. And then here is the palette case itself. That elastic band, I guess, is what's holding this whole thing together. So when we take that off, we can open up the wet palette. Okay, and this is our dry palette, it looks like, where we can do some paint mixing. We can obviously still thin our paints in here, actually use water in this. And all of the brushes are in here. Kind of nice, actually, and would make this very useful for a travel setup. You could very easily just put it back into that case. Give you a closer look at the brushes here. We've got 3 dry brushes. Looks like we have a few detail brushes. In fact, one here, this is... Let's see, we've got I don't think I've got a brush that small. This is like, this will be now the smallest tip brush in my arsenal. But a good mixture here, depending on what you're going to be doing. If you were traveling with this set and a few paints, you would probably be just fine. You could also just keep this all together, and it's a nice and neat way to organize your paints and your wet palette in one place. I, of course, have more brushes than this, but, you know, I might try to keep them in here. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. Overall, I really like Golden Maple's brushes. They are high quality, and I know we're not really talking about their brushes in this video, but these, I can tell, are made with the same, if not better quality than the ones that I've gotten before. You don't see this a whole lot with miniature brushes that are sold for like Warhammer or that sort of thing, but these little handholds right here, these finger, whatever, this grip shape, it's actually very comfortable, I've found. And you can keep your hand much more relaxed. So I actually like some of these brushes. I do have some of these in my arsenal, although the majority of my brushes aren't like this. They don't have that grip. And the one thing that is noticeably missing is any kind of instructions. I looked on the box. I've opened this thing up to see if maybe there was a little sheet of paper or something that I just missed. There is not. So if you had no idea how a wet palette works, that might not be that great. For somebody who's a beginner and has no idea what they're doing, that I think would be a good thing to have. Some instructions, like how do you take care of it? How does it work? I know it's a wet palette and it's pretty basic, and many of you watching know how a wet palette works. But for beginners, I'm always keeping you guys in mind. So you can definitely find some instructions on how to use a wet palette. I'll try to show you here to the best of my knowledge, but as far as wet palettes go, I'm probably as inexperienced as the rest of you beginners are. So first things first, we would want to get our sponge, and there are 2 sponges in each container, and these are damp to the touch. Not enough that, like, if I were to squeeze it, I can't really get anything out of it. And also, if I brush it against my glove, it's not really leaving any visible moisture, but there's definitely some dampness in here. So while that is probably the preferred dampness, we do want to add a little bit of water here. We don't want this thing to go dry really fast. So I'm going to take this thing to the sink, put a little bit of water in there to add a little bit more moisture I just think they didn't want the sponges to completely dry out before use or something. I don't know exactly what they were thinking. All right, we're back, and hopefully you can tell there's a noticeable color change now that we've added some water. This thing is thirsty. It soaks up quite a bit of water. To kind of compare, it's hard to see on camera, but it's a few shades darker than the unsoaked palette. I don't have a lot of excess water in there, though I could probably drip some out if I wanted to. Most all of it is in the sponge. And now we need to add our paper. Just one sheet, lay that down. Right, and the idea here is that moisture can transfer through this paper. And so if you were to press on it, you will see beads of water coming through. That is the whole idea. You want to smooth this out as best as possible and try to get it flat. For that, I recommend go to your local hobby store and get one of their gift cards and use that. Shout out to Mayhem Comics in West Des Moines, Iowa. All right, now we have our wet palette set up. Let's get some paint on here and see how it behaves. And I use mainly Army Painter paints, so I'm gonna use a variety, but I do have some Citadel. We'll put them all here on the palette. I don't think there's gonna be any major difference, but you know, for science. All right, as you can see, we've got them on there, and they can obviously, you know, move around, which I should have thought of when I tipped this thing. But that actually does allow us to see some of the behavior on the wet palette. We've got a contrast paint, an effects paint, and this is a shade. And you'll see as they drip, they're not really leaving much behind because the surface is moist. And if I dip my brush in there and spread that around, you'll actually be able to see that moisture on the palette. Now, a thin layer of contrast or speed paint like that should dry up pretty quickly, but we'll check back on that in a minute. And we can go ahead here and move some of our paint around, see how it behaves on the palette. And it's been sitting here for a few minutes and it's still very moist. I'm able to dip my brush into any spot and there's paint on my brush. There's no dry spots, not forming a hard outer layer or anything like that. So far it is kind of meeting expectations. Now, paint mixing is also something you might do on a wet palette like this. So I've grabbed some Mephiston red and we're gonna mix it with our Wild Rider red on the wet palette. And our Wild Rider red is still nice and moist and we can mix it in there, take from those two colors. I don't usually mix paints myself, but to see how easily you can do that here on the wet palette. Very nice. All right, let's come back to this speed paint and see if we still have some workable moisture. We do. It's very thin. It's a very thin layer, but you'll see there, we're still getting paint on our brush. Very, very impressive. Our matte black is still wet visibly on the surface. And I haven't even touched the mithril here. And it also just looks like I could just dip my brush right in there. Before, I have just used a dry palette with minimal thinning. Thinning helps. Adding a drop of water here and there definitely helps your paint last a little bit longer, but it does eventually dry out. And if you happen to be working with just a drop of paint or you don't like thinning your paints that much, this might be good for you. Of course, paint consistency is always the question when you're talking about thinning or not thinning your paints. But if you prefer not to thin them and you want them to last longer on your palette, then a wet palette seems like the way to go. And while we're talking about thinning, let's go ahead and drop a little bit of H2O on there and see how it works to thin paints on the palette. Kind of weird doing that with a metallic, of course, but you'll see it works pretty well, just like thinning any other paint with water. That's a very nice consistency there, and it's holding its moisture as expected. I can see on this matte black here where there's a little bit of drying out, primarily where I haven't managed to get the paper in contact with the sponge. That is something to be aware of. Also, our speed paint is definitely drying out now at this point. It's probably been on there for 10-15 minutes. I've kind of stepped away for a little bit and come back just to see how it lasted. Keep in mind, though, that I just smeared that all over the wet palette. So, of course, it's going to dry out eventually. You're probably not going to be doing what I'm doing here and just, smearing paint all over the thing. There doesn't seem to be much difference between the two, Citadel versus Army Painter. in how they react. And if you have any spots that aren't in contact, the back tip of your brush can help you get that back in contact with the sponge, or again, get out that gift card and do your best. This bubble here is really annoying, and so, man, I'm not sure exactly how to solve that. In the comments, if you happen to know, maybe you're a wet palette expert, let us know your tips and tricks for using a wet palette, because hey, I'd like to know, and other beginners watching this video would probably like to know as well. And the feel of this brush is phenomenal, by the way. Even just moving paint around on the palette, it's very nice. We're going to take good care of this thing. And as far as storing away, you can put this back over the wet palette while not in use. That would probably extend kind of the use of your paints on the palette while it is enclosed, since it's not going to be directly exposed to the air. Might be difficult to kind of like tote this thing around if you have lots of paint on there. It definitely would move around. But if it's just sitting here on your hobby desk, I don't think there's a problem with that at all. So as a beginner to wet palettes, I don't think that I could give this a hard score like, X out of 10 or anything like that. I don't have anything to compare to. But compared to not using a wet palette, man, this is something I've needed, and I've been stubborn about it. And thank you to my wife, if you're watching, for getting this for me, because I think this is going to level up my game. It's also going to extend the use of some of my paints, as I can close this up in between sessions. I'm a dad with small kids. Sometimes I've got to step away from the hobby desk really quick and then come back later. So being able to just put all that away, it's kind of nice. So do I think you need a wet palette? Probably. I'm not going to tell you to thin or not thin your paints, but if you don't, yes, I think it is a worthwhile investment. And even if you do, it's not going to hurt anything. Maybe this isn't the first purchase you make when you get into the hobby, but at some point in time, I think it makes sense. I'm going to leave an affiliate link to this particular wet palette in the description of this video. So if you want to grab it and support the channel, you can do so. And if you're into painting miniatures such as Warhammer or even the new StarCraft miniatures game, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. I only occasionally do reviews on this channel. Most of my videos are miniature painting. So hope you subscribe, stick around, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace. Okay, quick bonus tip here, post credits. Keep those edges down. We just put some water along the edges and then just kind of go in there with your finger right along that lip. It kind of helps. Maybe that'll work. Yeah. At first, the static cling is kind of not your friend because it makes the thing want to roll up, but that does help a little bit around the edges. So I don't know, maybe give that a try. Yeah. Cool. Okay, yeah, I just flattened it with the gift card. That made all the difference. Still a little bit on the edges, but man, that little bit of water on there, sheesh. No, that's great. That's like completely flat. Lovely.